Welcome to the podcast phenomenon that shall not be named yet. I guess we'll find a name for it sometime. With me today is the utterly despicable human being, my opponent in the Doomsday Cup, who managed to knock me out when I thought I was doing so good. Welcome to Mocha.
Yeah, hello. The Chromai and Miragal really sneak up on you. You know, those two those two as a combination are really gross.
Very gross. It's what I enjoy about Flesh and Blood. The more you learn, is to start with, it's like chaos. You don't know what's happening. Things are just happening, and the more you learn, the more you get sort of like a feeling for it. I'm at the stage as I will feel things happen, but I don't quite know what is happening, and that's what happened in our game. Like suddenly I was doing good, you were at half-life, I thought I had it in the bag, and then suddenly I was like, well, this momentum feeling I had, it stopped, and now I'm losing life, and now I'm losing more life, and what's going on? And then I was dead. I was like,
that's one of the big things that drew me to Dromai initially is I feel like there's a lot of room for the opponents to misplay.
just a second.
Nope, all good.
That was annoying. Uh, so, you were saying?
Yeah. Basically, one of the things that drew me to Dromai in the beginning was there's a lot of room for the opponents to misplay. You know, with it's very complicated from my point of view, right? The proper sequencing and what dragons to pick out. You know, doing all the value thinking, but also from the opponent's point of view, it's like another giant hurdle for them to also do that same math that I'm doing and then find a way to counteract it. It feels very hard to play into Dromai, I think, for a lot of people. Sometimes, you know, like as Bravo or Reinar, you know, I think like the layer one or the first approach is always just to block with, you know, a thing with 6. Like the first dragon attack that you can pop, you know, always pop it. It's just not worth letting her run away with it. But from Dromai's point of view, we also kind of like that because a brute with 3 cards is way less scary than a brute with 4 cards. So even like one dragon attack gets that whole engine going. So
Yeah, and we don't really have the ability to go wide, so we can't really clear your board. We have to think very carefully about what dragon to get, which is highly frustrating. And like you said, it's instead of just thinking about what cards the opponent might have, it's like, okay, what's his board state looking like? Which dragon should I sacrifice one of my red 6s to pop one of his dragons? But that means less, damage to the opponent. Like, will I regain tempo later? It's a whole thing, but it's very interesting. People say that Dromai for Brute is a very easy matchup. I've yet to reach that point myself, but I hear a lot of the good players talk about, for Brute, like Dromai is almost free, but not really my experience yet. But since you won the Doomsday Cup and you said that you were fairly new, tell me about how you got in to the game firstly.
yeah, so I started playing around the end or middle of February, I think it was. I had some friends that used to play Magic the Gathering, and they got out of the game due to the whole, you know, if you're like slightly aware of Magic the Gathering right now, I think people are, you know, there's all that stuff with Wizards of the Coast, and I don't know too much about it because I don't play the game, but my friends who were into it ended up leaving around that time, and they got into Flesh and Blood. And so when I was just over visiting one day, they're like, "Oh, hey, you want to try this new card game?" And you know, in my mind, I'm like, "Card game." You know, I played Yu-Gi-Oh when I was like 8 or 7. Actually, this is like another side tangent, but Yu-Gi-Oh is how I learned how to read and do math. It's crazy. You know, I don't remember learning how to read. My dad played Yu-Gi-Oh, and so you know, I was like a 4-year-old kid, like, I want to play Yu-Gi-Oh with my dad, and then I just like I don't remember learning how to read or learning how to play Yu-Gi-Oh. I've just kind of always had that, so that was sick. But then after that, you know, when I was like 12, I played Magic the Gathering for like a few months. But yeah, so my card game experience has always been as a kid, you know, card games, I never was that into it. They're kind of expensive, you know, playing in person, all of that. So I strayed away. But when they showed me Flesh and Blood, they had me play Fi, just the Blitz Precon, and Fi is like a very, very fun deck, especially getting into the game. You know, it's the simple like, oh, cool, every hand I just kind of or every turn I just
Go
play my whole
again,
hand.
go
You know,
again,
I
go
find the
again. Yeah.
sequence, you just keep going. So it's very fun. A lot of the resource management feels like a board game. You know, that's at least how I forget who I heard describe that a while ago, but that's I think one of the big draws for me into this is, you know, I like board games, and then Flesh and Blood is just the whole resource economy. I'm like, oh, I get that same feeling in my mind. So yeah, that's how I got into it. Was friends quit playing Magic the Gathering, started playing this game. I wasn't too sure about it, but I got into it, and now I think I probably play a lot more than they do. So I just a lot of spare time I have goes into this game now.
You also mentioned we should go on that tangent as well very soon. I think you mentioned that you were into fighting games. Are you that person in the friend group that picks up a fighting game and then, you know, 1, 2, 3 weeks later it's like, I don't want to play you anymore. You're too good. Like you geeked out too much, and now we're all just left in the dirt.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. I'm trying to. I guess part of the process for that is I started playing Uniclear, which used to be Unist for people who know it. It's the full title's Under Night, Inbirth, EXE, Late. It's a Japanese game, so it's got a long name. But yeah, I play the games a lot. I've practiced a lot. I go to, like, you know, the major tournaments and everything for fighting games. Like at Frosty Faustings this year in January, I got ninth out of 140 something for the game that I play, or the main game that I play. So yeah, I'm very into the fighting games. When I start playing, I grind them out. I definitely in a few weeks end up beating most of my friends. You know, that's the real drive. You give up the ability to have fun with your friends and instead destroy them. So, but yeah, the fighting games are a whole lot of fun. You know, it's really just those 1v1 competitive games. I think that's the main draw. You know, in like high school or middle school, you know, I played like League of Legends and CS:GO, but you just end up like fighting with your friends more than playing with them. So,
Yeah, for sure. I had the same experience. I didn't really like get that into fighting games, but back when like Tekken 2, Tekken 3 was a thing, like I got into it. And I think Virtua Fighter 3 and 4 and some of the earlier Mortal Kombat games, when they started to have weapons and stuff like that. And I also played a lot of Marvel vs. Capcom, the first games that I got like emulators on the PC and played it a lot. But I never really had anyone to play with, because it was like people would suggest fighting games and I would be like, hey, yeah, let's play. And they were like, okay. Half an hour in, like, and then my interest kind of died out.
Yeah, I think there's almost like a separate skill set for fighting games that is about learning how to play against your friends if you're a lot better than them and still have both of you have fun. There's like a whole different skill set for that compared to like just being good at the game. I think that's like an important thing to think about. Oh, I also wanted to clarify, previously I think I said ninth for Frosty Fausting. That tournament was 13th. I didn't get ninth. Ninth was a different bracket. I just, you know, cleared up in case anyone I know that knows me from fighting games is like, oh, he said higher than he got. You know, it's like, it was 13th, not ninth. But, you know, it's pretty close.
But you got into February. Yep. Started playing on Fi. What got you into like Dromai?
Yeah, one of my friends who was playing had a Dromai deck. He had bought an Uprising box and just opened a Flamescale Furnace. So he was, you know, like, oh, cool, I got the legendary for Dromai who runs it. Like, you know, he was playing that. So watching him play Dromai, and then on my own, just going online and looking through different decks and seeing how things play. You know, Dromai seemed interesting. I ended up buying the Flamescale Furnace off him eventually because, you know, he's playing Dorinthia now instead of Dromai. But yeah, just, you know, seeing a friend be able to play the deck, seeing how the dragons work, seeing that different axis of play almost than everyone else. You know, everyone else has to play these cards that go away afterwards. In Dromai, you play the dragon, you swing for 3, it's still there next turn.
Yeah, it's kind of gross if you ask me. From a Brute player, it's kind of gross.
Yep. Yeah, I wanted to mention earlier as well, for part of that, how people talk about Brute and Dromai, you know, being... I think a lot of people think that any matchup Dromai has, where the opponent has a lot of 6 or higher cards, is just kind of supposed to be a wash, where like Dromai gets destroyed. And I think a lot of that comes from... It feels weird saying this, because in my mind I'm still like new, or I'm still not good, but I think a lot of people who play Dromai, like if I just watch random match footage or spectate random games on Talishar, like there's... A lot of Dromai players aren't doing as well as they could be doing. You know, there's ways out against these brutes, and there's outs against Bravos, et cetera, et cetera. It's just the you have to approach the matchup very differently from how you would approach playing everyone else. You have to like sequence your order or sequence things better. Be able to play a bit of the longer game better. So it's just basically, I don't think it's actually that bad for Dromai. It's just harder and a different way to approach the matchup. So people have a hard time getting into that mindset.
Yeah, I get that. I think also, like, the more you get into Flesh and Blood, it's like an onion. There keeps becoming like or being revealed new layers to the gameplay that's important to the higher skill you are, the more these like pitch stacking and like I was amazed to find out the whole thing about sometimes you have to be patient for brute, like you have to wait for the blood rush turns, and the whole like it's kind of it's kind of like in CS:GO. Sometimes you need to be patient. When the opponent comes around the corner, you have to wait for him to pass the corner to see if his teammates also come out, and then you can shoot the both of them. In like when playing brute, it's like sometimes you draw the blood rush. You don't play it as soon as you see it. Sometimes you need to wait for the right hand to appear. You need to cycle your deck and play defensively until the right hand turns up, and then you go like. And along with pitch stacking and it's the gift that keeps on giving. I find it very interesting in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. Arsenal is such a. It feels weird to call Arsenal an interesting mechanic when so many other card games are by default, right? You just have your cards in your hand, or like in Yu-Gi-Oh, you can set spells and traps. And in Flesh and Blood, it's like, okay, well, here now you get one. Here's your one card you get to save for next turn or for the future, and it's just very interesting how that works. And also, pitching cards going to the bottom so you can set up for later and all of that. All of the mechanics work together in such a very, very fun way. Like, it all just kind of... It feels weird to say it all just works, because I know, obviously, they had to have put, thousands of hours into developing this game. It doesn't just work. A lot of thought went into everything and how it all comes together.
What's your primary focus now in terms of improving at the game?
Yeah, I don't have too many big goals or things that I want to accomplish in Fab. I just like playing the game and grinding it out. So as long as I can keep playing with my friends or going to locals, that's kind of the big thing. I know there's a few callings that are around me. I live in Southeast Michigan, so I know there's one over the summer, a couple over the summer that are in Ohio, or I think there's one in Chicago as well. There's a few events around me that I'm trying to go to. I travel a decent amount for fighting games, as I mentioned earlier, right? Going to a tournament that was in Chicago. So also traveling Flesh and Blood is just another section of stuff. I guess I'm used to it, traveling for gaming events like this. So yeah, it's basically just want to keep playing.
I was more thinking about in terms of developing your skill set as a player. Is there anything specific that you're working on currently? It's like
there's definitely problems over. I guess it's weird to phrase, but like when I went back and watched some of the replays from when we had played for the Doomsday Cup. They're all the sets that I've gone through and done. There's a lot of times, I think, where I get caught up in a certain line that I want to play, and then I miss out on something that might have like slightly more value or something that might be slightly better. Like, it's very easy to look at my hand and say, okay, cool, here's like Kyloria. Like if I have like Kyloria, who's the dragon that attacks, that lets you draw a card if it hits. There's other techs too, but the big thing that for most matchups is just you get to draw the card. Oh, or like a Yandere, right? And then Yandere is the one that attacks for 3. Has 3 life, and has the endurance counter for stopping 3 damage. The Yandere is, on paper, you pay 1 mana, and you have this card that attacks for 3 that has 6 total life. So in a way, it's like, 9 value for 2 cards, which Wounded Bull is a 2 for 8, and that's like, oh, Wounded Bull, crazy card, and Yandere's here is 2 for 9, assuming that doesn't get popped and the other stuff works out well. It could be less if the endurance counter stuff gets, like, tapped by a Kodachi from a ninja. But there's a lot of times like that, I think, where I see the nice big dragons or the nice shiny plays, and I ignore things that might just be directly better for the current situation and value-wise. I noticed I block with Yandere like every time. I'm like, this card is really good. He's very underappreciated, I think, in my own mind. So there's a lot of times where I just need to better recognize value of what cards I want to play on a turn. When should I just be going for maximizing value? When should I have the Kyloria hit? Part of why I had brought up the replay thing is I noticed specifically in a lot of the games, There were a few turns where I know I just, when I was playing, I wasn't thinking too hard. I was getting back into it, where I definitely misblocked or had a lot of issues. But a lot of turns where I was in the middle of the game and I definitely was on top of playing the way that I intend to be playing, where I basically didn't block properly to how I didn't play the turn the same I would now with, picking which card to block with and then what dragon to play.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is that something you do a lot? Go back and watch replays and do a lot of analysis on what you're doing, right and wrong.
I haven't done it as much for Fab recently as I would like. Part of that is just because I don't record stuff. For Doomsday Cup, it was obviously already streamed and recorded, so that was super easy to be like, oh, cool, I can just go back and watch those. And then if I ever play on Talishar, I always think, oh, I need to record this so I can go back and watch it later. And then I, don't end up doing it. But in fighting games, 100%, yeah, it's like a super big thing for the getting better at fighting games is watching replays, especially watching replays with people you know, or just other people that play the game a lot, because it's important to have their point of view as well. If you're just sitting there on your own time watching replays of yourself, it's very easy to think about your own game plans and forget other options that might be there. It's like how I mentioned earlier in that long ramble about what cards to block with and what dragons to play. It's easy to think about your game plan and how to adhere to it, and then there might be something simple waiting that a friend could just be like, hey, why didn't you do this here? Like, why have you started doing this instead in all these situations? Then you're like, oh, yeah, you're right. So replays are huge. Replays are very, very important to improving, I think, in any competitive game.
Well, what I found recently that's very useful or very important to my own learning is because I can only go to my LGS like once a week, and of course I could be playing with them on Talishar, but life is busy and whatnot. I find like a huge value in watching replays of a certain matchup that has a commentary. So, for example, I've been watching a lot of that guy Nathan from Savage Land News, and he will play a lot of matchups. And it's okay, I'm playing the story player today, and he's explaining all the lines he's doing, the mistakes he's making, and I feel like that's a great way to improve, because as you slowly level up, you will need, to begin with, you need a very broad set of guidelines to improve to the game. And the better you get, the more like details you get. Okay, so when you're playing the story player, you need to prepare for this D-react because they usually play this, so you need to save your reckless swing for the second cycle or whatever it might be, right? And I think that there's if there's any content creators out there who have the skill, that kind of content is like very. I don't have the skill yet to do stuff like that, but that is something that I spend a lot of time consuming, because like that's a great way to improve. Like watch skillful players play.
Yeah, definitely. On a similar note to the replay, watching replays is important. Watching replays of people who are good at your character, who are good at your deck, is very, very important, right? For all the reasons you'd mentioned. It's in fighting game terminology, or at least the way I usually think about it, is like layers of. You mentioned the onion earlier for how deep Fab is. There's layers to the game, but the approach to a matchup, or like the game plan, has layers where layer one would be, what's just the hardline best thing to do. Like in a fighting game, you usually assume that like your layer one is to beat whatever your opponent's most basic, obvious options are. So a lot of times, right, people are just kind of mashing, right? They're hitting all the buttons as hard as they can. They wake up, they mash. You're like trying to pressure them, they mash. Like that's just how it goes, right? They're always hitting buttons. So your layer one is going to be ways that stop them from hitting buttons they want to hit, right? So like in the big game I play Under Night, there's a lot of frame traps or things that you do to make it so that way if they're mashing, you give them a little gap so that way they start to do their move, and then you hit them out of it. You give them a space so that way they can do something wrong, and then you get them for it. And that's like the first layer. And then so now, right, if they know that you're doing that to them, there's a way they respond to that, and then your layer two is responding to their example of that, et cetera, et cetera. And Flesh and Blood, I think, is very similar to that, where you have to have your layer one of gameplay, where you go in and say, okay, this is my solid game plan, this is what beats their main game plan, or like most of what they're aiming to do if they're just kind of like playing the game regularly. And then as you go through the match, you can see how they respond to you doing that. You can kind of gauge how good they are, what their actions are, and then you can, adjust layers as need be. I heard an example of, I think there was a Mansant video about this, where he had mentioned he played the same Dash player, I believe it was, at Pro Tour 2 or 3 different times. And every time he played against them, they played the matchup very differently. And that was them. I was like, oh, this is like fighting games. They're going between the layers. You know, they started off playing one way, and then realized, okay, this next set I have to play differently because they're aware of my game plan from the first game we played. And then he changed it up, and the Dash changed it up as well. And, you know, it went on into a third game where they played again. So it's, I guess it's important recognizing those layers, like you had mentioned, for how deep Flesh and Blood is. Or I guess part of the layers you had mentioned for is like how deep and complicated how nuanced a lot of the mechanics are. And then I'm talking about like gameplay stuff, but it's the deep game at all points. So
Yeah, I think there's like the obviously some of what you're saying is like the chess analogy, right? That okay, one move you're thinking to start with, you're just thinking about moving one piece, and the next level is you're moving one piece and thinking about what's his next move and what is your next move in counter to that, and then it kind of just because there is a lot of kind of predetermined things in terms of fair, because a lot of it is math, and depending on the value of the cards and whatever, how they are pitch stacked, it is, I wouldn't say that the outcome is predetermined, but there is kind of like those layers to it, a certain predictability. If you are playing a certain set of cards in a certain set of way, then the outcome will be pretty predictable. But what I recently saw, I can't remember where it was, but it was Wanji from Fabled Hunters who talked about the implied value of a card. So not just the math value of the card, but what's the value of threatening, for example. They talked a lot about, I can't remember, it was Crippling Crush or Spinal Crush, but it's like, what's the effect of, if the opponent knows that you have it, you know, what's the effect of threatening to attack with it if it takes away some part of his game plan, you know? And that's like even the next level of what's the implied value of threatening, for example, as a brute player, okay, a Savage Beatdown, or like when he knows that he's on 2 life and I might have the reckless swing that could kill him as soon as he makes the attack, you know, what's the value of that? And that's yet another layer. But I found it interesting is that as a new player, that it's like, I think that's why Flesh and Blood is so appealing to the analytical and all the nerds out there, because once you get going, it really kind of, you can fuel that learning experience. There's so much to dive into in terms of the gameplay, and it just kind of opens up, and each new card and each mechanic that you learn connects with another one. It's it's cool. I love it.
Yeah, I had played a bit of Icelander and Blitz before she got Living Legended, and I just, like, every hand or just thinking about stuff, I'm like, this is so complicated. There's so many different options or ways I could take this for choosing when to spend resources, and I, like, don't have the time to sit here and think about all of them, like, in the match. You know, I'm not experienced enough as Icelander to, like, know what the better plays are, because that whole implied value thing gets very crazy when you start thinking about what your disruption is doing and how much it's adding on from what you've stopped your opponent from doing. You know, like, earlier when I mentioned like Yandere or Kyloria, you know, Kyloria has that on hit, you know, which is huge. If the opponent might be thinking, okay, this is my Blood Rush Bellows turn, I want to play this out, you know, I'm just going to take whatever they can throw at me, but you play Kyloria, you know, that 4 damage is much more scary than 4 damage. There's this implied stuff coming from, there's this implied damage coming. It's almost like, you know, another form of disruption where they have to respond to it in some way or else you're going to get even more ahead. So, also on that note, I think that's kind of a big thing that Brute as a whole class is lacking, is the only real disruption that Brute has is like, okay, well, I can do 20 damage this turn. That's kind of it. You know, you have the big numbers, but there's no nice, there's nothing like scary that happens. You get to intimidate a bit, but then the opponent comes back with full hand. There's a lot of, in a way, it's not as terrifying as it could be. You know, Icelander does something that stops me from, or like plays CLF, and now every turn, or every card I play costs 1 more mana. It's like, whew, this turn's kind of ruined. But if Brute gets like their good turn off, it's like, okay, well, they did 18 damage to me, and now I have 4 cards again, and I'm just gonna go do my stuff again.
That's a very frustrating thing. I mean, it is nice that you can kind of, when you don't intimidate all their cards away, you can be lucky and hit something that they actually wanted to play that actually stays in the hand. So that can be kind of disruption. But I do recognize what you're saying, and that's something that's been frustrating. Is I've been doing a lot of reps these past days on Talisha, because now that we're actually playing Brits Brits at the armory. I actually have a chance to win. Went 2 for 2 at the last armory with just a random deck that I made, and now I've made like a one turn kill meat axe build that can actually be. It's very similar to the thing I played in the Doomsday Cup, but I actually have the the items or the equipments down because that they kept messing up when I was playing the Doomsday Cup. But I've been hitting really good numbers. But it's going good, and I think I actually have a chance to, if I can high roll it a bit, I actually might walk away with a win. Obviously, there's some of the best players in the country playing there, so obviously I would have to be extremely lucky. But it's good to feel that going into something like that I actually have a chance to win. Which brings me to maybe kind of interesting to, like, so you're kind of new to the game. You see that Stackswell is hosting the Doomsday Cup number 2. It's free. What kind of made you sign up? I can hear that you're like a really competitive person. Already you're used to traveling in fighting games. Was it just like, hey, I'm going to sign up, what the hell, or what made you sign up?
Yeah. So my one friend who I talked about had opened the Flamescale Furnace. He had linked Staxel videos a while ago, like I think around when I had started playing. So he's been on the Staxel train for a while, and then naturally I watched the videos. It's like, what is up, gamers? It's very just like fun videos. So watching along with that, when the Doomsday Cup got announced, I wanted to enter. But the very first one that happened, I was traveling for a fighting game tournament. I forget which one it was, but I was out of state, for a fighting game tournament. And then the original second one that was planned, I was also traveling. So this one, that was the true second one, because I know the last one got canceled. So, the real second one that happened
Postponed.
was postponed. So I was finally open. It's like, oh, cool, I can enter this one because I'm open. So really, I've been trying to enter them the whole time. I just didn't have a time available until this most recent one. But yeah, it's I think in a lot of ways, entering tournaments online is one of the best ways to get better, right? Or just entering tournaments in general. You get those. For certain that everyone that's playing is trying their best because there's some prize on the line. Or at least it's there's some prize in line. There's a tournament. It's like, okay, let's show up and try our best and try this out. There's only, I guess, so much you can get on casuals on Talishar, but even without tournaments, I'm sure I could similarly like improve and keep going just playing Talishar. But the whole tournament atmosphere is, there's always a little bit different, always a little bit more nervous. It's always it's got that little tinge to it.
So take me through your matchups. Like, it was a relatively small tournament, right? You played four games to win it.
I think it was 3 or 4. I know I had a bye on the first round, which just by chance I had a bye. So it was either Brute, Riptide, or Brute, Riptide. I know.
I played you in the second game. I remember. I played you in the second game.
Yeah, you were the first set or the first game that I'd played because I had a bye from that first round. So you were the first person I played, and then I forget if after that I was placed into winners finals. But in a 6-person tournament, if I have a bye round 1, I believe that should put me in winners finals after 1 match. So yeah, I think I only played 3 games where it was you and then 2 against the Riptide who got second.
So tell me about let's just forget about you and I's game. It doesn't matter. Let's just gloss over it. Take me through the finals of playing against Riptide. Obviously, I had to go to bed when I went through the losers bracket and lost there. I had to go to bed because it was like 4 in the morning. Obviously I couldn't watch the finals game. Take me through the finals game. What was it like? What happened? How do you win?
Yeah, it's been a little bit since I watched the replay from last time, but a lot of the one key turn I remembered is that I had a chance where I took a decent amount of damage, I think towards like the mid or mid-late game, and I was able to play a Rake the Embers. In addition to this happening, like for taking the damage, I knew that I had my Sigils of Solace that were coming up, or, I hadn't seen any all game yet. Maybe I'd pitched one earlier, but I knew, enough time had passed that I was like, okay, I can afford to take this damage here and go down to 6 or go low, wherever I was at. and play out the Rake the Embers. And then Riptide, similar to most rangers, has difficulty clearing the Ashwings because I play two cards to get out these three Ashwings that I'll hit for one and block or have one life. And Riptide can only really kill them with cards that hit for 3, 4, 5. It's difficult to just clear the Ashwings as if you were a ninja or anyone else. Similar to how Brute, right? You can only swing into it with big cards. So the ability to get those Ashwings out and just to keep pinging on damage every turn also enables me to just block with my full hand, play one red card or one red card, and then keep swinging the Ashwings. So basically, I was able to slow the game down a lot towards the last half of it and just be able to build that board state again. Part of how I mentioned earlier, people that play into Dromai, it's very easy to misplay, or that's part of what drew me to it. Is a lot of games. I feel like if I get close to the end and I have 10 life left, people start thinking, okay, I don't need to kill the dragons. I can just kill her. Like we'll ignore the board state. We can just take her out. We're gonna get her. But in a way, I think that's like playing into what I want because I can just be like, okay, cool. Now I'm gonna switch into block with my whole hand mode and just swing with dragons every turn. And then that slowly chips the opponent away until you get back to it. So yeah, that last finals game was very, very close. I remember like halfway through kind of stopping and realizing like, this is getting very tough. The life difference isn't working the way I want to. There were when I watched the replay, I remember there were quite a few turns, like I'd mentioned before, where going back, I would play them differently now. But I mean, it's easy to look back at the turns afterwards and say, oh well, should have done this or that. But that's part of the learning process. So there's just some of those hands where Kyler Evers Yandere. That's just like the easy one that I keep bringing up. But I was talking about that concept with some other friends earlier, so that's why it's fresh in my mind. But yeah, it was very very exciting and very nervous at the end where I think I had realized like, okay, cool, I think I can win this out. I just have to keep blocking. I also made sure to stay above one life. I didn't ever go down to one because I was afraid of there's some ranger trap that kills you at one, yeah, or the way Riptide stuff works. Yeah. I remember as well there was some inexperience on his end from in the Dromai matchup because they had activated a trap that does not trigger on dragons against the dragon. And I remember even hearing in the replay afterwards, Riddler saying like, "That's weird. The Talishar bug out. Like, why didn't this trap activate?" And I don't know the exact reason why in the rules it works like this, but it's like the dragons aren't actually attacks, or they're however they work. The traps just don't work the way they're supposed to against dragons. Just at rules as written. So that's cool for me. I hadn't played against too many Riptides before playing in this bracket. None of my friends play Riptide. Maybe I've played against Riptide once on Talishar, but going into it thinking, okay, this is the guy that has a lot of traps that don't work against my dragons, and also is just like the other rangers, but without any ice disruption or other stuff. I can probably just treat this like I would treat Lexi or Azalea, and just kind of, get through that way.
So, have you received your prize yet? Have they?
Yeah. Actually, I don't know how easily visible it is back here, but this up here is the cold foil burn them all, the cold foil burn them all that I got.
Ah, nice.
In the mail from it, and then the one to the left is a barbed castaway I got from winning. It wasn't exactly an armory; it was like a local play thing we did at a local game store that doesn't officially host tab events, but had some of the promo kits from when they used to, and they were still trying to be like, well, we can't sell these, and we want to give them away to people who win. So if you get 4 people to show up, and host a tournament, whoever wins can get one of these. So my 4 friends and I showed up and entered one of those, and I got the cold fill from it. So
that's cool. Have you been engaging with the people from Staxwell's Discord afterwards, or are you just kind of like an in and out person?
Yeah, I'm in and out for a lot of things. I just kind of every now and then I'll float in, see what's going on, say something, or if there's a spot to speak. I think in a lot of cases, the way I approach most of the like internet communities is I lurk for a long time before I say anything. There's a lot of steps of like seeing how people interact and talking to people. Because I don't know, in my experience for a lot of fighting game stuff, it's very obvious to me when someone new shows up who has not like read the pins or has not done like their basic due diligence of like how am I supposed to act in this community.
That's me.
Yeah, I mean it was me for the longest time. So only now is it's like okay, I'm gonna kind of not interact as much and slowly get into being someone who talks a bunch. It's just I don't know. I don't mind like waiting. I'm not like chomping at the bit to talk to everyone in Saxwell's Discord. I got a lot of stuff I can be doing. So I enjoy my time there. I enjoy talking to people whenever I pop in and say something. I've never had a bad experience. It's just part of the also too, I'm in a lot of different communities who do a lot of stuff, right? Like all the fighting game stuff, everyone else I talk to from other things that I do. So it's I just have my hands in a lot of stuff, I guess.
Speaking from the standpoint of someone who also does a lot, how do you balance all those things?
So for a while leading up until recently, my work was very, very slow. So there was a lot of opportunities during the day to just kind of be like, okay, well, I'm like sitting here waiting for the person to respond to me for, the next part of how this task is supposed to work, whatever's happening at work. I can just kind of like watch gameplay footage on YouTube or, do whatever else. The last few months work's picked up again, so I've been busy, but I think a lot of the balancing, I don't think too hard about. I just have a lot of friends that are all involved in these things. So whenever people are saying like, hey, let's go do this, I'm like, okay, yeah, I can go do that now. So, uh, I'm lucky in that I have a lot of real life friends who do a lot of the things that I'm interested in. So I can just, they're kind of the test for like, oh, I haven't talked to, Jack in a while. I can go hang out with Jack and do that stuff again. Or I haven't talked to this guy in a while. I can go do that again. So, and then for the current moment, I guess it's just whatever piques my interest. Recently it's been Flesh and Blood, so I've been doing that a lot. Street Fighter 6 came out
Yeah,
actually
I
the same
saw.
weekend that the Doomsday Cup happened. During the Doomsday Cup, when I wasn't playing in bracket, I was playing Street Fighter 6 on the side. So like I'd play my my match in for Doomsday Cup, and I'd be like, okay, cool, back to Street Fighter 6. Then I'd play Street Fighter 6, and then I'd see the ad in the Discord like, hey, you got to come back. I'm like, okay, back to Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, definitely doing a lot. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so one thing I get from you is that it's like some of the people that I was playing in the Doomsday Cup, I was just talking all the time because my basic mentality when going into these things is that I'll probably lose, so I'm not going to take it too seriously. Just lighthearted, gonna banter a bit with people, talk, and just have a good time. But I noticed that some of my opponents, they were very nervous. You could hear them like breathing hard and like really thinking about it and going quiet. I noticed that I got the sense that some of them were a little bit annoyed that I was just so lighthearted and just this is a bad hand, let's see what happens here and whatever. But to me it seems like you're very comfortable here. And so what would your advice be for anyone wanting to do a tournament but feel kind of intimidated or nerves related to actually doing something like that for the first time?
Yeah, I think in a lot of my experience, the nerves don't ever really go away. It's kind of like they just stick with you, and you learn how to like cope with them or manage them better. It's just one of those things that show up. I think when I was starting to get into fighting games, or I was starting to like more compete seriously in tournaments, a lot of what helped is just like, I guess actually this is more about the first one because I was thinking over time it became easier. Like the more I did it, the easier it got for just dealing with nerves. But for that very first like tipping off point for joining into a tournament, I guess one easy way in is just having friends also join along. Like my original start into fighting games was because of that. I had friends in real life who were also playing, so it's like, hey, the three of us are gonna go out and play, and I'm like, well, I'm not gonna stay at home. My friends go out, so I had to join along for that. I think in general, I guess the key thing to think about or to focus on to get that initial first step, if you don't have that, is just to think about, like the joys of the game or the fun. You're not, the goal isn't to enter these tournaments and to sweep house and to win. You gotta like join with the goal of improvement and having fun and all of that. Winning, I guess, is a side effect of that. So it's easy to get into your own head over these things. And I also wanted to mention in the beginning, I know when we had played, I was definitely super silent. I'm a lot more talkative in person when I play the games. It's just like easier to do the back and forth versus online. And also, I remember when we had played, my first like 2 or 3 hands, I remember misplaying pretty severely, or even thinking about that in the moment afterwards. I was like, okay, I gotta just like, we gotta, it's no more like we're just shh. I just gotta not talk and think. I was not bothered at all by your talking. If anyone else wants to talk, that's like totally fine by me. I'm all there for it. It's the game is private. It's a game. It's supposed to be for fun. But I had to like hunker down and be like, okay, brain, we gotta get through this. We gotta we gotta beat this brute somehow. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and you did like it was. Oh man, I thought I had the game in the bag. Like, oh, but enough about that. But it's kind of it kind of irks me that you didn't see that Gorganian Tome video yet, because I'd really like to get your perspectives on it as a fighting player, because he just, it's a very well made like documentary style, well thought out video about the similarities between fighting games and Flesh and Blood. And I think you, as someone who has their hand in both, would really enjoy it. and probably
Yeah,
have a
when I
lot to
get a
cover.
chance after this, I'd like to. I'll watch it. Maybe I'll come back to whenever this video is posted. I'll come back and go in the comments and try to bring that back up to be like, hello, I watched that video. Here's my thoughts about it. Try to do a quick little thing for it. So hopefully I can get that get that done through. Because yeah, it's super. It's only like 20 minutes long. It's a pretty easy watch. So
Yeah. Um, what else is there? Um, what's your what do you do to improve? Do you just scrim a lot on Talasha? Do you play with friends? Do you just go and analyze your own, just take notes, mental notes, or what's
yeah,
your
I think
strategy?
the thing I have the most time in for learning and improving the game is definitely like watching replay footage or just going on like the Discord and trying to read through Draw My Chat and find the people like, okay, let's search for everything Mara has said, and then let's just read through Mara's conversations and see like her opinions on things. I'm I guess as an additional bit for stuff that I've been involved in. A while ago, I was playing StarCraft 2 a lot. It's another 1v1 competitive game. And so the one of the big guys who teaches newer people how to play StarCraft 2 in the videos, he always says like, "Okay, you're a new player, you don't get to think. You're no more thinking for you, if you're or sorry, if you're a new player and you want to improve, you want to be good at this game, like how everyone else is, like no more thinking. You're just going to like watch the people who are good and you're going to copy them exactly and you're just going to do that." And eventually you'll be able to realize like, oh, this is why I'm doing this. Then you'll grow from there. But like the first step is always find people who are way better than you are at the thing and watch them and copy from that. So that's kind of been like the main goal in the beginning.
Is
Uh,
that sounds like something Day 9 would say? Is that him?
he might have also said it. The person I
Uh,
was thinking of is Winter Starcraft.
oh yeah, I've
He
seen him
does
as
like this
well.
angry coaching where he yells at people like, "You, what are you doing?" So
But
that's always entertaining.
I've heard this metaphor or like saying before that first you imitate, then you innovate. As
Yep.
but I do think also I remember who was it? There's another StarCraft guy talking about. I used to follow StarCraft, competitive StarCraft a lot when it was before Twitch was a thing, when it was cast live on GOM TV, like straight when you had Tasteless and Artosis
Yep.
casting
Yep.
the like in the good old days. And I remember seeing a coaching session once where he was talking like when you get ahead, you don't turtle and sit back. You get more ahead. That's where you press your advantage and build that extra expansion. That's kind of what you need to do in Flesh and Blood, right? Once you get those extra cards out of the hand of the opponent, you don't just sit back, or you can use that advantage to sit back and wait for a better hand. But this is where you need to press the like the attack and increase your advantage, so their chance to come back also decreases, right?
Yep. That's why too you'll see a lot of players, as I'm sure you've noticed, right? People's life totals tend to like match as they go down in the over the course of the game because the people who are ahead realize, okay, well, I can block 8 damage, but my hand does way more than that. Or like even if I can block 8, but my hand does 8, right? If you have less health than me, it's more worth it to just play the cards that do 8 and take the 8, et cetera, for taking even more cards away from your opponent. Obviously, it gets more complicated than that with value and what you're expecting and pitch cycling, but just that first layer of, well, if I have 40 life and they have 20 and they do 8 damage to me and I do 8 damage to them, that's a net positive for me. You got to keep pressing that advantage and not getting yourself behind if you can help it. It's pretty simple for me to do that as Dromai in the sense that I'm playing the red line Dromai deck, or almost every card is red, so it's it's very simple to just be like, okay, well, I can look at this hand and see that I can do like 12 or 13 damage, and I'm up on life. I'm not blocking. I'm just gonna do it again. And then two, there's part of that for like life managing to get lower than the opponent because Arcanite Skullcat, but that's a whole like how the deck runs thing.
Do you have any advice for new players on how to get a better grasp of the whole concept of value in Flesh and Blood?
Yeah, I'm not I guess I'm not too sure on that because I'm also not as like proficient as I'd like to be in that. I'm starting to think about it more and more, trying to just have those thoughts in my brain. But a lot of it is the first part of it is think about how many cards you're spending and how much damage you're doing or how much damage you're threatening if they don't block anything. What's that implied value we had mentioned before. So uh when I was first starting to play as Fi, or when I was first getting into the game, very frequently my Fi hands would be able to push 12 or 13 damage again. It's like the pre-constructed deck, but each card only blocks for 2, right? So if you can block for 8 or do 13, doing 13 kind of ends up working out. So you just kind of play through the turns in your head, see what would happen, try to expect, okay, if I play this Kyloria and I swing with it, am I expecting the opponent to block it, to pop it, or to let it hit, and how does that, branch off from there? So some of that too is looking for I guess it's all very contextual. It's difficult to get into. In a lot of ways, that's the game, right? It's the whole numbers game. But I also wanted to mention before when I had said like if you're trying to be better at the game, just copy people. And of course that's like if your goal is explicitly to improve at the game. If you just start trying to play Flesh and Blood for fun and you're not trying to be like, okay, I want to like top 8 a calling or I want to do this or that, then just do whatever you want that's fun. Don't you don't got to listen to me or anyone else saying like this is how you get better. You need to just copy people to play the game. Like just do whatever. Just have fun.
Yeah, I think that's. I just think that. I don't know. I don't know if Flesh and Blood is hard to play casually. To me, it's not that I'm actually super anti-competitive in a way. Like, even though I've competed in a little bit in martial arts, and obviously I play to win at the armory events and whatever. But I'm not really competitive. But it's once you get into Flesh and Blood, it's like I want to win. Like I want to feel that satisfaction of actually winning, and playing this meat axe build on Talishar lately has been super satisfying. Usually I'm just like racking up losses, but I think I have like to start with I had like a 70% win rate. Now I'm at maybe a little bit above 50. But it's so satisfying once you start seeing the lines and it's like, oh, I got him to 2 life. Wait for that reckless swing and then bam, close the game. It's so satisfying to see that game plan that you're setting up actually work. And that's just, I think it's hard not to get a little competitive once you really get into Flesh and Blood. Obviously you can just play it with your friends and have fun and stuff, but once you start going to those armories and meeting the other people and like I don't know what it's like where you're at, but okay, so you said you were going with your friends and whatever, but most people I hear talk about what their LGS is like, or when they go to armies, people are super friendly and you're making new connections and just it kind of feel like going to those events really grows your appetite for the game.
Yeah, they're definitely armories are a lot of fun. The official Flesh and Blood armories that have been hosted around me, I've only been to I think 3 of. Thursdays used to be a very busy time for me, and I've tried to rearrange some schedule stuff to get that a bit more open. Part of that is because I host my own net play tournament series for the internet game that I play that's on Thursday, but it's every other Thursday, and then there's all the scheduling stuff for it. But yeah, going in person and playing with people is a blast. I know my local armory scene, someone who frequents it got top 64 or 32 at Pro Tour. They play Fi, and so I got the chance to play them in at an armory, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. He was like, the issue wasn't Fi, because Fi and Dromai is apparently pretty bad for Dromai, but it's just like Fi and Dromai is bad, and also that guy is very, very good. I could just playing through it. It's I really like how this is probably the case in other card games too, but I don't know enough about them to be able to tell that as easily. Like in Flesh and Blood, I feel like I have a good grasp on seeing people play and thinking like, okay, this person is good at this game. It's like pretty obvious. I shouldn't say obvious, but you can watch a few turns and be like, okay, they really know what's going on. They're really, really good at this. Similar to how in fighting games, you could watch and after a few minutes of gameplay, like, okay, yeah, they're solid. They really know what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, it's like that. Good players, and they just exude a calm confidence that just it's and that's where the competitive spark in me is really ignited, because then I was like, I want to just be in this game instead of just being like a floor mop, something like yeah, sorry, dude. Sometimes when I play the better players at the LGS, they're like, I'll ask them like, yeah, so why did I lose here? It's like, yeah, pretty much this is just a bad matchup for you. Rhino into Rune Blades, you're never gonna win really unless you're really lucky in high roll. It's like, yeah, okay. All right, go ahead. But wrapping this up, if anyone is interested in fighting games or connecting with you or anything, where would they be able to find you? Do you have social handles and stuff like that?
Yeah. Everything should just be Mochadashi. So, mocha, like the coffee, and then Dashi's Dashi, just Mochadashi. So I'm Mochadashi on Twitter. My YouTube is at Mochadashi because YouTube has the new handle thing. My Discord, that's the place. I would say for a lot of things, I still in my brain think that I'm not like, that great of a Flesh and Blood player. Like I'm still so new to it, or at least into the time sense that it's like weird to me to think like, wow, I'm like, I can give people advice on this game. I'm still like, whoa, that shouldn't be me yet. I still got to learn more. As I mentioned earlier, I just copy Mara Ferris. I see the deck list. I'm like, okay, cool, we're going to do that. Part of the red line Dromai I had some ideas about beforehand, just because I had the Draconic cards laying around. So when I was making Dromai, before I looked up how deck lists work and I was just playing super casually, I was like, some of these cards that I play in Fi, I can play in Dromai. Like, I can use Lava Burst in Dromai. Like, that's just totally... No one can stop me. That's like part of the rules. Sick, and then eventually it turns out Mara Ferris had like already discovered a lot of that and had all this great work into it. There's so many cool little like pieces of tech that Dromai has. But yeah, for fighting game stuff, you're into that, for sure hit me up. I play Akatsuki in Internet Birth, so he's a guest character, which is like it's interesting. But just hit me up on for that for fighting game stuff, Flesh and Blood stuff. But as I just like to be clear that I don't believe that I'm that great at this game still, and a lot of what I do is just taken from people before me. So I want to give credit where it's due.
Well, there's no one saying that you are going to be the next $1 million coach, but if people wanted to connect or practice or just share things, that's just connecting.
Yep. Yeah, feel free.
So with that being said, we are going to wrap up another episode and another really getting to talk to the winner of these Doomsday Cups. It was Riddler Man who said, hey, you want to continue the tradition of interviewing the winners? And I said like, yeah, I can't say no to that. So it's kind of like preordained that I would. So Mocha, I hate you for beating me, but thank you very much for coming on, and I'll see you on the Discord and probably in the next Doomsday Cup.
Yep, I was gonna say hopefully you'll see me again after the third one.
More practiced and more ready than ever. And to everybody out there watching, remember to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and that notify me button. And we'll see you guys in the next video.